Okay, well, let's get started. Welcome to the August 18th meeting of the Oregon Global Warming Commission. It's not the July 13th. I didn't fix the headline there. Today we are going to be going over our two main projects that we're currently working on. First, to get an update and look at the scenarios and some of the financial metrics and a sneak peek at the co-benefits work for Oregon's roadmap to 2035. After the presentation, which will include some clarifying questions, we will open it up for public comment. And the public will be welcome to comment on anything that's on our agenda or anything they want to bring before the commission. Then we'll take a short break and come back and have a commission discussion on the work that's been done to date, specifically on the work we present today. And then the last agenda item is to get an update on our natural and working lands proposal project. And then we'll close out with next steps. So that's kind of where we're headed today broadly. Before we close out this introduction part, I'll ask Linda to remind people how they can raise their hand for public comment and to make public comments to the commission. I just wanted to acknowledge the significance of the Inflation Reduction Act that was signed into law on Tuesday, and the significant opportunity that it provides for both of the topics that we're going to be discussing today. The work, because of the investments across all sectors, including natural and working lands, that bill will, that act will have, and the support it'll provide to states towards meeting their climate mitigation goals. So really excited to see that, and I think it makes me feel more confident in the work, the potential to achieve the goals that we're discussing. So very excited about that. I wanted to also, as an update, thank Wendy, who has been supporting the commission this summer as the Department of Energy recruited for Maya's replacement. And so I just wanted to thank Wendy for stepping in and really helping out. I wanted to thank the department for the speed at which and the great work that the department did in recruiting Maya's replacement, who has joined us today. Zach Baker will be helping the commission as part of his duties. And I'm just thrilled to have him on board to support the commission and the Department of Energy more broadly. Alan, did you want to say anything, or should I just pass it over to Zach to introduce himself?
I'll let Zach introduce himself, but many of you know him. I'm really thrilled that Zach chose to come work with us at Odo. He's got a great resume, a lot of good experience in climate change, and I think he's going to be an incredible add to the team. And I don't think we'll miss a beat when he gets fully up to speed. So right now he's in sponge mode, but he's a quick learner, and he'll be helping us out quite a bit, and it has already. Zach, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Thanks, Chair McDonald, and hello, commissioners, and those listening in to today's meeting. Zachariah Baker, and go by Zach for short. Really excited to be diving into this position. I know many of you through my previous work and can't wait to work with you in this role. And for those who I haven't met yet, I'm really looking forward to meeting and working with you. I've worked in the climate and clean energy space for a while now at the local, state, and federal levels, with the majority of that work in Oregon. Most recently, I was at the Oregon Public Utility Commission working on utility planning, procurement, and decarbonization, including implementation of HB 2021, the Clean Electricity Bill. And before that, I worked for a Northwest-based nonprofit called Climate Solutions, designing and advocating for state and local policies on climate and clean energy. And in that role, had the privilege of serving on the Rulemaking Advisory Committee for DEQ's Climate Protection Program. And then I've also worked in the Oregon legislature as staff to a state representative and served as a city councilor in Corvallis, Oregon, where I helped the city develop a climate action plan. So definitely more to share, but I'll leave my intro there for now. And I'm really looking forward to supporting the work of the commission. And please don't hesitate to be in touch as we go. And thanks.
Yeah, welcome, Zach. It's really great to have someone with that diverse background. So great to have you here. Let me just look at my notes and make sure. Great. One thing I just wanted to mention, I've been having challenges with my internet. So if I disappear or so I can't see a slide, it'll pass soon and we can pick things back up. And I appreciate your understanding of that. And then I thought we would go ahead and take roll call, and I will just go to my screen and try and go down the list to and have folks say that you're here. So Representative Brock Smith.
Brock Smith here.
Representative Commissioner Reitman.
Yes, here.
Commissioner Jackson.
Here.
Director Bateman, and welcome.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chippentauer. Commissioner, oh, I don't think we could hear you, Cheryl. Will you do that again? We can't hear you, so maybe Linda can work with you after we get through the roll call to see if she can help you figure that out. I was having trouble with that earlier today, so I understand the challenges. Commissioner Ford.
I'm here. Good afternoon.
Director Benner.
I'm here. Nice to see everyone.
Jumping around, you guys are all jumping around. Commissioner Apter.
Here. Good to see everybody.
Director Whitman.
Here. Good afternoon, everybody.
Senator Finley.
Finley is present. Thank you.
Welcome. Commissioner Potowski. You are on mute. Can you try to come off mute and say you're here? It looks like Commissioner Potowski might be having some challenges as well.
My challenge is I didn't unmute. Sorry. Good afternoon.
Welcome. And Commissioner Magnera.
Present.
Welcome. Excellent. I think that concludes. If I missed anybody that's on the commission, I think I did. So with that, I will open it up to commissioners. If you have updates that you want to share with the commission, would love to hear those. Commissioner Benner, or Director Benner.
Yes, Chair McDonald, thank you. Chair McDonald asked me to share a little bit about the recent visit from U.S. Department of Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm. She was in Portland on Monday, a week ago Monday, to see some of the great things that our state is doing on climate change and some of the new technologies that we're pioneering that are going to help us with our clean energy transition. So we started the visit at Electric Island, the collaborative between Daimler Trucks and Portland General Electric. We were joined by the governor and the 2 senators. It was a little bit of a victory lap on the Inflation Reduction Act, but the secretary got to drive one of the trucks. It was pretty cool. And hear more about the goals and the efforts of Daimler, which are pretty fantastic, and some of the work that the state is doing to support that effort. In the governor's remarks at the press event, she mentioned the work that this commission is doing on the roadmap to 2035 and the analysis that we talked about last time, showing that that our goals are in reach if we implement and fund the programs that are on the books. And I thought she did a really good job of sort of taking a victory lap, but also emphasizing the need to do the work that we say we're going to do and the importance of continuing to keep our feet to the pedal on that one. Then we went south to Wilsonville and visited a battery manufacturer called ESS. It's a long duration energy storage battery that doesn't use lithium. And they are doing some really neat work there. The senators were very excited about that technology and the potential to expand some of the work that's happening in that facility. And then finally, we went to Oregon State University to see their Wave Technology Center and learn more about the PacWave project, where they're actually starting to get some well, soon we'll be putting some of the wave energy devices in the water and hear about the funding and permitting successes they've had. And there was a lot of interest from the secretary in the work that's happening at our universities. So thanks for the opportunity to share that. I will just share one other thing, which is Chair McDonald mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act, and that's really, really exciting. I just want to make sure people understand that, at least for funding for energy, the U.S. Department of Energy has a lot of work to do to get money out the door from the IIJA, and that is starting to come our way, but it takes time. For them to they're having to staff up and get money out the door, and then we'll have to staff up and get money out the door. So I just want to make sure people understand that Inflation Reduction Act money is great. It's not coming yet. It'll be on its way, soon. But I think one great thing about both of those bills is that they are not really focused on shovel-ready projects. They're really focused on supporting capacity and development and implementation of longer term plans. So I think Oregon is very well positioned to receive a lot of funds, in part due to the work that's been happening at this commission. So I'm going to put in the chat a link to the Oregon Department of Energy's webpage on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which will, update with information on the Inflation Reduction Act as we get it. But feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Sorry, that was a long update.
Thank you, Director Benner. That's great. And I completely agree. It will take time, but knowing that it's a 10-year program, it also provides that certainty to be able to kind of expand programs. Are there other updates that commissioners want to make? I'll just note that Suzanne Carlson is here representing ODOT, and Catherine Williams is here representing Northwest Natural. And I don't know if Mike is officially representing Oregon Department of Agriculture, but he's here and glad to have you join us. I'm trying to see who else might be in that same role. I think that might be it. But do Catherine or Suzanne, do you have any updates you'd like to share?
Kathy, can you hear me? This is Catherine.
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry, we've been working behind the scenes on I needed to be in a different category to speak, so I'm glad it's working. I just wanted to pull something out of what Director Benner said, and that is she's right. There's a lot of, in terms of the investments that have to be worked out. The good news is some of the work on things like hydrogen and production tax credits for that and RNG, we're hoping won't take as long because it's sort of a different way of boosting investments in those places. So while there absolutely has to be rules written around some of those programs, we're hoping those will happen faster and sort of, you know, boost some projects even more quickly just by the evidence that Congress is sort of supportive of those two ways to decarbonize the gas system. So excited about all the aspects of the IRA, learning more every day.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Yeah, thanks for switching me over. We're working at ODOT towards same goals in close partnership with state agencies, looking to start investing in electric vehicle infrastructure.
Your audio is really low, so I don't know if you can. It started out strong.
Just checking if I have my right microphone set.
That's better. That's much better.
Didn't really do anything. Just saying that we're working in close collaboration with our state agency partners, investing in electric vehicle infrastructure, using some of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act funds, and then looking forward to a lot of the regulations that are coming forward this fall that we're counting on as well to really move the needle on greenhouse gas reductions around fuels, vehicles, as well as other things we're doing around transit and transportation choices and any number of things, and that we've collaborated on the greenhouse gas plan that we'll be talking about later in the meeting here.
Great, thank you. Danny, anything to report for Oregon Department of Forestry?
All right now. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right. Linda, will you remind folks that may be online and interested in testifying how they can identify themselves as being interested in testifying?
Yes, how you can do that is if you look towards the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a little smiley face, and just to the, it's in the reaction. And if you look to your left on of that, you're going to see a hand. If you click on that, it's a raised hand, and that will indicate that you have a question, and that'll indicate to us that we can call on you. If you're out as a attendee, you can hit *3 to raise your hand if you're on the phone, or you can click on I believe you have the hand or the raise hand button in addition to that, to the group there too, down near the bottom as in the reaction buttons. And you will show up as wanting to go ahead and have a question asked. If not, if you cannot get our attention in those two ways, you can go ahead and go into the chat and type a T and your name, and then that will indicate to us that you have a question. Thank you.
Great. And I said it very quickly when you were going off mute, but Director Bateman, it's great to have you on board, and excited to think about how we can collaborate on things moving forward. But just wanted to welcome you as this is your first meeting, I believe.
It is. Thank you. I could say a few words about what we've been up to in recent months, if you'd like.
That'd be great. Yeah.
So again, I'm Brenda Bateman. I joined the Department of Land Conservation and Development as the director May 1st, the same day that the state was reopening to the public in all of its front lobbies and front desks. And since then, our commission has met a couple of times, and in their July meeting, passed the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities rulemaking that they've been working on now for intently for the past year, but obviously for longer than that. It's quite extensive. We're very excited about it, and we just filed the the permanent full set of rules with the Secretary of State yesterday. These are pretty important. I like to call them generational rules, and we view them as a bit of a legacy of our previous director, Jim Rue, who was very supportive of these rules and very active participant in their writing and their development. We know that climate change is real and that so much of it comes from transportation, that really the crux of these rules are to give local jurisdictions the permission, or we are asking them to remove barriers to climate friendly areas so that future development is more walkable and more structured closely together, so that folks who are interested in other kinds of housing, multifamily housing, middle housing, duplexes, triplexes, quads can build on lots that are currently zoned for single family, and so that they can move around and access jobs, recreation, education, and their daily business in absence of a car if they would like. And so there are many different pieces of these rules. We actually are holding office hours and continuing to be in contact with local jurisdictions. We will, in each of our commission meetings, bring forward what we're hearing, where folks are having challenges, where there are questions, and we will continue to be active participants at the table during implementation. We also have a budget package that we'll take into the next legislative session specifically to support this implementation. It's probably one of the largest requests we've ever brought forward. We want to make sure that we're there at the table and helping with implementation all along the way. So happy to take questions, and the details will continue to solidify and emerge over the next several weeks and months.
Thank you. I think it'd be great to have you and the Department of Transportation maybe do a joint presentation to this commission and also to the Natural and Working Lands Advisory Committee, because I think there are some great benefits in terms of natural and working lands protection. So opportunities there too, in addition to all the great health benefits and greenhouse gas benefits of those rules.
We would like that. ODOT's been a strong partner providing funding for assistance in this biennium, as well as our requests for the next biennium. So it's a nice funding and support package we've put together. Thank you.
Oh, and also the Oregon Department of Energy. They were partners in that as well. Excellent. Well, I think we have completed all the introductory and updates, and we can go to our first agenda item. Alan, are you pulling that presentation up?
Yes.
Excellent.
Let me pull it up. There. Let me know when you can see it.
I can see it now. I'm not sure it's in presentation mode, but
Should be. There we go. How's that?
that's perfect. Great. Thank you. So as I mentioned, today we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about and giving an update on the modeling work that is going into the development of our roadmap to 2035. I will be kicking us off, and then Alan will be talking through some of the details of the modeling effort. And we also have our consultants on from SSG to be able to add depth to some of the comments that we're making and answer any technical questions that folks might have on this work. And you go to the next slide, please. So today we're going to do basically kind of a quick reminder of where we've been and what we've been learning. And then we're going to kind of dive deep into the scenarios that we have developed that go on top of the reference case and baseline that reference case and projection for our programs and regulations that are both in place and under development. We will both review the carbon benefit, climate mitigation benefits of those scenarios, but also some of the financial results to date. We'll get a sneak peek at the co-benefits metrics and kind of give you examples of how we can look at these metrics. We'll be talking about that more at our next meeting. Then we'll finish off the presentation with next steps. The presentation certainly want the commissioners to feel comfortable asking clarifying questions, but we can hold more clarifying questions and discussion for after a break that we'll take for public comment. So hopefully we'll have plenty of time to really dig in on this. Next slide.
Has a bit of a delay, Kathy.
Okay. So just a quick refresh on where we've been. At our last meeting, as I mentioned, we presented the reference case and the go ahead and click again. You have it. We presented the reference case and a forecast, and looked at the programs that are in place, the programs and regulations that are in place or under development, as I mentioned. And at this meeting, next slide, we will be talking specifically about the scenario analysis and the MAC curve. And then, as I mentioned, getting a sneak peek on what we will be talking about in September. Next slide. I'm still 2 slides back, Alan. So I don't know.
Yep. That one.
I'm still 2 slides back, but hopefully I'll catch up.
Okay. Get you back up. This is a lag, annoying lag. That's fine.
Still
You want one more?
But if other people can see the slides, I can speak to them. So what slide are we on?
I think you're on the slide we were talking about where we left off last time.
Yeah, I don't know that there's more to say. Have you progressed the slide?
There you go.
So at that last meeting, we presented that we are currently on track with the programs and regulations that are in place and with the programs and regulations that are under development to meet our 2035 goal in 2035. So that was great to see, and Jeannie mentioned that in her remarks about the meeting with the Secretary of Energy. And then today, focusing in on the scenario analysis and MAC curve information. Next slide.
It likes to do 2 at once.
I'm still not seeing it, but I can move on. So at this point, we are we on slide 7?
We're on slide 6.
Slide 6. So we are developing out because we found out that we are on track to meet our goal for 2035 by 2035, we are looking at a accelerated goal to see if we can, what we would need to do to meet our 2035 goal by 2030. And we had decided to do this early on in our planning process, both because of information that's been coming out from the IPCC and other science-based target groups that are strongly recommending that we make more progress. Other jurisdictions' goals, as well as the new nationally determined contribution that the U.S. made to the Paris Agreement. Commissioners' comments encouraged us to look at an accelerated pathway as well as public comments. So that's the rationale for us looking at that. Next slide, please. And in looking at the scenarios, we had originally identified that we would do two scenarios, one that focused on electrification and a second one that focused on alternative fuels. And you may recall, we kind of thought these could be bookends, and then the commission could develop a final scenario based on, can you go back a slide, please? Final scenario based on some combination, potentially either one of the two scenarios or some combination of actions in the two scenarios, but it was intended to be kind of a bookend. We discovered in modeling the alternative fuels version that we could not meet the 2035 goal by 2030 without some electrification. And as a result, we created a third alternative, which is a hybrid model that's focused first on alternative fuels, but adds some electrification into the scenario so that we would be able to meet the 2035 goals. So what we will be talking about today is those two alternatives as we and the result of those two alternatives. So
sorry, Kathy. Should have someone in a higher pay grade do this than me.
We'll get there. And I think this is where I turn it over to you, Alan.
Right. So we ended up having only two scenarios that we were instead of three, because the hybrid, as Kathy said, ended up being pretty much the same as the alternative fuels one. So the two model scenarios that we modeled were the electrification and also the hybrid, which is focus on maximizing the use of RNG and hydrogen with additional electrification actions as needed. What I wanted to show you here was this is the electrification scenario. You're familiar with the previous graph where the blue part is all the programs and regulations that are adopted or under development that met our goal in 2035. So to accelerate the goal and meet it at 2030, we need to add more actions, and that's the green bar here, the green area under the graph, and you can see that it meets the goal by 2030 as well. And then the same for the hybrid scenario, which is the yellow scenario or yellow area under the graph, which meets the goal by 2030 as well. If you superimpose both of them.
Hey, Alan, sorry to interrupt. The slide appears to be grayed out. There's like a gray box over the picture part of the slide.
Yeah. Let's see it that way. Okay.
I think that could be bandwidth issues on our, there we go. That's
Is that good? Okay.
The slides are also available online, so if folks just want to go over to the website, it might be helpful too.
Yeah.
Great point. Thank you, Commissioner Apter.
Technology always ends up getting us, doesn't it? The yellow area of the graph shows the reductions that would be associated with the hybrid scenario. And then if you superimpose both of the scenarios onto the same graph, the blue line is the programs and regulations adopted or under development. And then you can see the green line is electrification and the yellow line is the hybrid scenario. They basically meet the goal in 2030, and they both have pretty much the same trajectory going towards 2050. And of course, the slides or the actions that are needed to deal with getting to 2030 accelerated, meeting the goal of accelerated for 2030, are that all of the big lever programs are pretty much used up with HB 2021 and the CPP, and they're already included in the programs and regulations already adopted or under development. And so the actions that were available to us for this scenario are relatively much smaller relative to those two big lever programs. And if you recall, at the very beginning of this process, we spent a great deal of time and effort compiling agency and public input on potential actions we could use to meet our goals, and many of you contributed to these ideas. In the end, I think we had about 120 or so different actions that we could use. And remember, many of those actions will be also used to comply with HB 2021 and the CPP. And so we didn't want to try to figure out exactly what all those actions would be to meet those two programs. And those specific actions will be developed over time through the PUC and their IRP process by the utilities and the energy suppliers. And these will both be robust regulatory process with literally thousands of hours and millions of dollars spent to figure all this out. And we weren't going to try to replicate that here. So for the Tigger project, what we did was we assumed that for both 2021 and the CPP, that the greenhouse gas emission reduction requirements that are required by both would be met. And so for the scenario development that we had, we developed, we tried to use the programs that wouldn't be fully utilized in the CPP or the HB 2021, and that could be initiatives that we could do at the state level. And so therefore, the two scenarios had about 36 to 38 actions they needed to do to meet the accelerated goal. And here is a list of some of the actions, the common actions that were included in both scenarios. I know this is kind of an eye chart, so I didn't expect you to read all this. Again, we'll welcome comments and questions about the specific actions, but we didn't want to get bogged down too much in the details with these over 30 different actions in each one of them. But just suffice it to say that in both the electrification scenario, the heat pumps and water heaters are electric, and in the hybrid, they're both electric and natural gas. So there are also there are also actions that are not in either, that are unique to each of the different scenarios. So while there was significant overlap, there is a set that were unique to both the electrification and unique to the hybrid, and that's what these two tables represent. And we'll put online the details of what all these projects are and the details about what they cost and what they save, and they'll be available for people to comment on. So graphically, the way that this looks is, again, familiar graph of here's the programs and regulations already adopted and under development is the blue part. And then all of these little programs, again, much smaller than the ones that we had already, big lever programs that we already have under development or adopted. And so it's a combination of all these little projects that make up the ability to make the scenario or make the goal meet us in 2030. The same with the hybrid scenario, a multitude or a whole grouping of different programs to be able to meet the goal. And with this modeling, we'll be able to show exactly what each of these programs represents what their costs are, what their savings are, and what their greenhouse gas emission reductions are. And with that, we could create this graphic, which is the MAC curve. And what this slide shows is the marginal abatement cost curve, affectionately known as MAC curve, for the electrification scenario. We have one similar for the hybrid scenario, which I'll show you in a second. Again, the point of a MAC curve is to show the rank ordering of the actions by cost effectiveness. So from the most cost effective on the left to the least cost effective on the right. Each colored bar represents the net benefit or cost on the vertical axis, meaning up and down, and below the line, meaning they're a net benefit, above the line, meaning they're a net cost. And the amount of greenhouse gas emission reductions is represented by the width of the bar, or on the x-axis. So in this particular case, the new construction building codes, the most cost-effective net benefit in this modeling, it shows a significant benefit to be had, net benefit to be had. That means total cost minus savings equals net benefit, and it has a substantial amount of greenhouse gas emission reductions. Some of them have less benefit. Some of them have costs, like the yellow one, and some are wider and some are skinnier, depending on how much greenhouse gas emissions they reduce. So that's kind of the basis of what a MAC curve is. And in the legend up here, it shows the different programs that we have in each scenario, and they're segregated out by the ones that provide net benefit and the ones that have net cost. From a least cost planning perspective, the way you would implement this is that you would start on the left and do the most cost effective blue one and go to work your way through the MAC curve all the way over to the right to the other blue curve or blue box, and that would be the least cost effective. And by the time you got to the other ones on the far left, you hope that either technology or other things lowered the cost so that that they would be more cost effective. So one of the key things about this kind of graphic is that all of these programs and actions that are over here on the left, the most cost effective ones, are the ones that create net benefits. So they have kind of built-in incentives or built-in market mechanisms that allow the marketplace and private industry or third parties to be able to implement these things, or have them occur relatively quickly by government action. And as opposed to the ones that are on the far right, which have a cost and probably will need incentives or programs or regulations in order to achieve them. Many of you have heard of the Resilient Energy Building Task Force or Rebuilding Task Force that's going on right now. They're kind of working on the bookends of this. And I think this will be a very interesting curve to them. I'd like to turn this over to Chris at SSG and Yule and have them talk about a little bit more about how they built this MAC curve and what they put into it.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, so I guess the underlying data around this. So we've built a financial dictionary that we've shared with Odo and Kathy, and I'm sure that they're happy to share it with the rest of the group, which outlines kind of the costs, capital costs, for example, for building retrofits or heating equipment or vehicles, as well as maintenance and operation costs associated with those, and energy costs associated with the different energy currencies that we're representing in the model. And so by applying those costs to the actions that we've modeled, and taking the difference from the prod scenario, or the kind of the planned action scenario, under development and applied actions, and taking the difference between that and these scenarios that we've represented, we can get what the difference in costs would be across those kind of areas. So the main areas being capital costs, operation maintenance, and then energy costs. So some of those will be a positive, some will be a savings, and basically we look at those action by action. We take a net present value of all of those costs over time. So, and we discount using a discount rate of 3%. Obviously, we can do some sensitivities around different discount rates to get different lenses with which to view this data. But once you've discounted those values, then we divide that by the emissions reductions on each of those actions that we've seen. So the wedge that Alan showed you earlier, we would take the cumulative total of those emissions reductions over the whole time frame of that action, and that'll be so then we'll take the cost and divide it by that emissions reductions, and that will get you the graphs that Alan are showing right now. Yeah, and anything else you wanted me to talk about out there, Alan?
I think that works.
Well, while you have the floor, Chris, Commissioner Magnera was wondering if manufactured home replacement was included in both scenarios or not.
Saw that. I was typing her a message, but I can definitely speak to it and be a little bit quicker. So as you notice there, you may notice there that there is an action called retrofits of residential, and so these were deep residential retrofits that we modeled. Pretty much, I think, almost 100% of the buildings. I can't remember off the top of my head. I don't think it was quite 100% by 2040, and so that would be covering a wide, across all the different building stocks in Oregon. So even though we didn't explicitly kind of single out manufactured homes as a single part of the wedge, that action would include either kind of a home replacement or a significant upgrade to that structure or to that mobile home or manufactured home. So it would be kind of included in that action, although not explicitly separated out.
But you could, because you do know the building stocks across the state, we could look at this a little more, a little more granularity if we wanted to.
Yep, we could definitely do a deeper dive.
And then a question from a non-commissioner, but about whether the tax credits in the Inflation Reduction Act, especially for commercial buildings, would affect the net cost of the two items on the right, or at least retrofits in commercial. I don't, we have not included the provisions of the IRA in modeling. As we've discussed at our last meeting, our intent is to update the projections as new programs come online, and we hope to be able to get resources to be able to do follow-on modeling to keep this work really current. So we have kind of as much as we can of real-time information about how the programs are going to work. And then Angus has a long question. Maybe I'll just, if you have presenters.
Kathy, can I add one more thing to the IRA thing that you're talking about before we move on to Angus's question, which is the IRA will certainly help us meet these goals. All what we're going to achieve through the goals that we have is deeper reductions than what the IRA is going to provide. So it won't actually we'll go beyond that. But all of the incentives and programs that will come out of the IRA will help us meet our goals. So it'll help us meet the HB 2021 and help us meet our CPP and all these different programs as well. So it'll make it much easier for us to be able to get there.
Absolutely. Linda is going to unmute you, Angus, so you can ask your question.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, welcome.
Hi, and everybody. First, Kathy, I'd like to know how much you paid your IT people for the capability to mute and unmute me at will, because my wife would be interested.
It's a good business opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. Big one, big one.
There might be a few others.
And my question is not to challenge the results, but to try to understand particularly the issue of substituting electric heat pumps for either resistance electric or gas heating systems and and electric cooling systems, separate cooling systems, and whether the analysis looked at these kinds of sensitivities in trying to decide where to place electric heat pumps on the MAC curve. And I won't go through all of them, and I'm not sure I captured all of them, but I expect your consultants could look at those and just tell me whether those were incorporated or not.
Yeah, so I guess, consider like, so heating and cooling degree days are considered as projections as part of this by different counties. So the different counties will have different numbers or different values for heating and cooling. So the ones on the east will be a little bit colder than the ones on the west. So we do account for that. We aren't, this analysis is not at an hour level, so we're not looking at kind of like different peaks for different weather or different times of the year. So that would change kind of the analysis a little bit more, obviously, more specific. So we are just looking kind of at total annual, which obviously is a limitation for doing a deeper dive into understanding energy needs at that level. But we do account for the change in kind of weather or climate overall. The demand for heat pumps would probably adjust the scale cost or reduce the cost. We are being a little bit more conservative and keeping the cost kind of constant, because we don't really have. You could say it could go up, you could say it could go down, and both arguments could be valid. But we're just kind of keeping it. We're using the EIA's projections around heating and cooling equipment for both residential and kind of non-residential spaces. So we're using that as our guide. And again, smart circuit boxes would allow for that more kind of hourly load and load management, which again, we're not really doing at this level of analysis, but we could kind of apply that going forward if somebody deemed to look deeper into that.
And I'm sorry, Chris, are you looking at the cost benefit of being able to incorporate cooling into a system for no extra cost versus existing systems where AC cooling is a separate function and a less efficient one as a rule? But that requires sort of projecting forward into a climate weather model where there are more hot days that heat events that need to be addressed. But clearly, we are already at least in the early days of that heating curve and cooling requirement curve. I'm not, like I say, I'm not challenging where you put it on your MAC curve, but that seems to, or those issues, and possibly some others as well, seem to me to invite some sensitivity analysis of where the heat pump crossover point should be incorporated in a MAC curve. And I suspect it's given where you've got it, it's a plus or minus either a net benefit or a net cost. I guess I also didn't ask you whether you're looking at the first cost or the life cycle cost.
Yes, like what do you mean by life cycle cost, I guess, just to clarify?
I'm sorry. I mean, what I mean is the first cost of an electric heat pump is substantially higher than the first cost of a gas furnace.
Yep.
But the much lower operating costs over time, even if you assume a steady state weather pattern, but especially if you assume a progressive weather pattern, the combination of first costs and operating costs over, say, 10 or 15 years are going to look very different for a heat pump than for a gas furnace and a separate air conditioner.
Yeah, so we do include some of those life cycle costs. So the maintenance costs would be included over the lifetime of that piece of equipment. And the model does do a stock turnover. So once you purchase a piece of equipment, it has a lifetime which it lives for, and then it gets discarded and gets replaced by either by whatever we indicate what the model should be replacing it by. So that's being included, and then the energy costs also of running that piece of equipment as well. So one of the couple of things that are driving that heat pump existing for the residential to be like a net cost would be the more, as you noted, the more expensive nature of those pieces of equipment relative to a natural gas furnace. At the moment, again, we're keeping those costs constant going forward. We're not really showing any decrease in it based on uptake of technology or things like that. Just we don't have the insight as to what that would be. So you could do a sensitivity around that. And then also the cost of electricity, even though you're using less energy, the cost of electricity is quite a bit more expensive in Oregon, about 4 times more expensive than natural gas currently at the moment, which again, using the EPA's EPA or EIA, I can't remember the acronym, projections around energy costs. So as you know, those are pretty volatile at the moment for some of the natural gas right now is quite volatile considering all the things that are going on. So we obviously can't capture all of those unknowns going forward. So we are being a little bit conservative in those assumptions. And as you suggested, sensitivity analysis around that could change the positioning of that going forward.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. I think made my point. Appreciate your unmuting me. And now, Kathy, you have the divine pleasure of muting me again.
Thank you, Angus. Catherine, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. I had a question on the net benefit of new commercial building codes. I assume it did not include industrial zoning, but I wanted to clarify that because I think it's just a big piece of sort of non-residential. And then just a follow-up to the conversation just now between Chris and Angus. Did I hear, Chris, that you said that peak planning has not been considered in part of this analysis, and that it might change the expected cost if it were peak on either side?
I don't know if it would necessarily change the cost, but yeah, we're not looking at hourly loads at this point in this project. So it's purely on an annual basis. So the hourly obviously would change around things planning around adequacy and deployment of the resource like electricity and natural gas that we're looking at. So it's purely on an annual load. And as far as industrial zoning, new commercial buildings don't include industrial buildings. As you probably know, industrial buildings are sometimes there isn't even a full building on an industrial facility, right? So it's really the industrial process is what we're looking at more interested in, the energy being used in those processes and less so around the buildings kind of constructed for those.
So the industrial.
Kathy, those are down here, like the pink one here, industrial process, and the green hydrogen for industry. That's how industrial gets handled separately from
just got
commercial
the
building.
materials, so I'm processing it. I saw the non-CPP industrial load in the common action section, but I was trying to sort of see where industrial is captured in all the common and different action buckets. So thanks.
Yeah, so for the big actions we did around like non-CPP actions, and then there's some overlap with some of the CPP, obviously, would be some leftover kind of industrial efficiencies that maybe could happen, or introducing hydrogen into and RNG into the industrial processes as an alternative to natural gas and other fuels.
Thanks.
Excellent. Any other points on this slide? Or should we move on?
I just want to make one more point, Kathy, before we move on. And that's so a lot of these programs like the heat pumps, whether they be electric or natural gas, for instance, and the building retrofits, equipment retrofits, sorry, are assuming really high penetration rates very quickly, like 100% heat pumps by 2025, 2030. So it's a ramp up at a pretty rapid pace to be able to get these kinds of savings. So that kind of leads into the question about co-benefits and how that actually plays. The fact that we're going to get all 100% of the heat pumps installed is what we're going to do, but how we do it is a different question. And this project hasn't tried to get into the how we do it, but the co-benefits try to get at that by saying equity, for instance, and dealing with low income people will be a higher benefit to the state of Oregon when we add in the co-benefits associated with it and not just take the simple economic analysis, which this graphic shows. So for instance, if one of these particular actions in the middle has really high co-benefits, and the commission ranks that higher, it could rejigger the order of this so that particular action with high co-benefits could come up in the priority order. So in essence, move to the left on this graph, even though cost effectively, you wouldn't do it that way. So that's how we tend to incorporate the co-benefits of health and equity and jobs and things like that in order to reprioritize these MAC curves by incorporating co-benefits. To date, I'm not sure anybody's actually done that in the country. A couple of people have attempted to go there, but most people just stop here and say, this is the way we should do it, go from left to right. And but we're going to try to incorporate the co-benefits. Again, that's next time, next meeting's work.
Commissioner Apter, would you like to make your point?
Oh, thank you. I basically included what I was hoping to say in the chat, but just hope we can continue the conversation around the Inflation Reduction Act. I think it's very important both in terms of how we are framing the policy options in any of the scenarios, as far as how we can best position the state to harness the federal investments that will be coming down the pike. But I think it goes both ways, and particularly, of course, with the financial considerations. And I named just a few examples in the chat, and I know others have been referring to these as well, but just significant incentives and rebates for many of the pieces that are in the latter, the net cost arena, like residential and commercial retrofits and heat pumps. Certain provisions will cover the entire cost of heat pump installation for low-income households. So that's definitely very relevant to how we're framing costs in these on this slide. So just want to keep that conversation going, and happy to brainstorm how best to provide that overlay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be great for us to marry up the provisions in the IRA with the recommendations and kind of show how that might change. I mean, this could be this is the overall cost, but we could get a lot of that from the federal government.
Right, and obviously the IRA was signed yesterday, and we've been working on this for months and months, and so we haven't been able to incorporate that. But as Commissioner McDonald said, Chair McDonald said, we are going to be doing updates of this on a regular basis. So the next iteration of the Tigger project can incorporate that kind of analysis. The cost that we have incorporated here is the total cost. It'll bring up the question of, do we want to do total societal cost or just Oregon cost? If it's just Oregon cost, we can deduct the federal incentives, and then it would just be what's the cost of Oregon, or do we want to look at it on a bigger scale at the national level, so total societal cost as opposed to just Oregon cost? But that's a question for a different day. So this is the MAC curve for the financial metrics, for the MAC curve for the hybrid scenario. I wanted to now shift gears a little bit. And when you add up all of these blocks together, you get aggregate results. And the financial results that we're looking at are what we're going to look at next. And I wanted to have a couple of important things to understand about how we calculated the financial benefits. First and foremost is they do not include the costs and the benefits associated with the programs and regulations adopted or under development. So all those, the HB 2021 and CPP, all those other 13 programs that we had listed before are not included here. This is just the incremental actions that we're talking about here, the 30 or 30, 36 or 38 incremental actions that are used to accelerate, meet the goal by 2030. So it's only those direct cost of implementing those programs and the direct benefits associated with them. So it does not include any of the additional infrastructure needed for implementation, like if we electrical transmission and distribution upgrades, or pipeline local distribution upgrades, or the transportation infrastructure investments that need to occur. That was out of the scope of what our ability to calculate was, and that will be actually figured out over time through that robust regulatory process we were talking about that'll allow us to move forward. So with those understandings about what how we develop the financial metrics, I wanted to show you this next slide, which is actually the financial metrics. And of course, financial metrics in its grander sense, what we're talking about is how much investment or cost is there, how much energy savings do we get, how much savings do we get from operation and maintenance, and then so if you deduct the savings from the cost, you get net benefit or net cost. In this case, for instance, with the electrification scenario, and this is through 2050, mind you, the red numbers are investments or costs, and the green ones are savings or benefits. So in this case, for instance, for electrification, the total investment cost is $87 billion, but it saves $141 billion over the 2050 timeframe, and another $16 billion from maintenance savings, for a total net benefit of $70 billion over the 2050 timeframe. An important part of thinking about that is that investment of $86 billion is not what the state has to provide to be able to do that. So a lot of that is based on replacement, includes the natural occurring replacement of equipment and on cars to EVs and all the different things that people would do on a natural basis. So that's the total cost of actually doing all of this stuff. The incremental cost would be a lot lower if you took all the rest of that naturally occurring investment out. And same for the hybrid, little higher investment cost, substantial expenditure savings, and energy savings and O&M savings for a net benefit of $57 billion over the 2050. Again, this isn't for the all of the actions, it's just for those incremental actions to get us from the 2035 goal to accelerate it to 2030.
Any questions? Okay.
For those of you that are graphically oriented, we summed it up in some nifty graphs for you. The one on the left is the cumulative net present value investment and returns. It's not nominal dollars, it's discounted dollars. So it shows the investment bar, and then which is a cost, and then the maintenance is in red, savings, and the energy savings is in yellow, and then the net benefit is the light blue. So that's a different way of looking at it if you want, if you're more graphically oriented. The graph on the right is actually a year to year, and it does have nominal dollars in it. So one of the interesting things about that graphic is the blue is the capital expenditures, the investments that need to be made. That's the total investments, not just the incremental. So it includes all those replacement costs that would naturally occur anyway. The red is the maintenance savings, and the yellow, the substantial energy savings associated with it. The black line is the net cost on an annual basis. You can see that in order to meet the goal, accelerated goal of 2030, you have to front load the actions. And so you see this bump in the early part in the 2022 to 2030 timeframe, where we're seeing about an average of about $8 billion of investment through 2030. Again, not all of that will need to be capital by the state or utilities. because most of that occurs through natural replacements. And so you can see that the cost curve, which is that black line, actually has an initial investment cost, and then over time, what happens is the substantial energy savings create the benefit associated with implementing these actions. Chris, you guys, anything to add to these two graphs?
You got it. Yeah, that all sounds good, Alan.
Yeah, and I just wanted to show you, this is the graph associated with the hybrid. It's essentially the same graph, similar. The numbers are different, but on an annual basis versus cumulative on a net present value basis. So some of the key takeaways that we wanted to share with you about the financial results are that while there's a substantial amount of investment capital to be needed, both scenarios create a net benefit and not a cost to Oregonians. I think that's pretty significant. Most of that net benefit comes from the substantial energy savings. There is some from the O&M savings, but that's about 1/10 of the energy savings. So most of it comes from being more efficient and the ability to create that efficiency through new equipment that replaces old equipment. And that kind of concludes the part about the financial metrics. And anybody have any questions about these last two slides? Because we're going to move into co-benefits and set up our next meeting. So if you have any questions, clarifying questions about the financial results, we can entertain them now because we're going to move on to co-benefits.
Yeah, Mike asked a question, Mike from ODA, about the cost savings don't include potential cost savings of co-benefits, just energy savings, correct?
Correct.
And we are going to be able to layer in some of the cost benefits of some of the co-benefit costs and benefits as well.
Right, and we're going to talk about that next.
Yeah,
that was a great segue question. All right, I'll move on. So the ability of the modeling that SSG had allows us to look at a lot of metrics from the model. And this is a list of the metrics that that the model's able to crank out. It can crank out health savings in dollars, number of person years of employment or jobs. We also can calculate the social cost of carbon impact, and then some metrics like capital expenditures per household, or residential energy or commercial energy use per household or square foot, and transportation costs per household. So we're able to see what happens over time. And again, because we built this model from the counties up and aggregated all the counties to get to the state level, we can show all of these metrics by county, which is actually pretty cool and very will be very helpful, I think, for a lot of folks to see how that actually works. And we'll show you a little bit about how that works in a second.
And to the point you made earlier, Alan, where this is primarily focused on what and not as much on how, that ability to look at these measures by county, I think would help inform how. And
exactly.
So it starts to get us into the how would we design these things.
So as the commission moves on to the next phase of this project, we're going to be trying to figure out how to incorporate the co-benefits associated with each of these different actions. So we want to be able to, and some of them are quantifiable and some of them are qualitative. Equity, for instance, isn't necessarily quantitative, it's more qualitative, but we'll be able to incorporate that into the process to, like I said, rejigger that prioritization of the MAC curve so that we can have the actions that have high co-benefits be the high priority ones that the state looks at. So let me get into a couple of these. Are there some questions, Kathy? I think
No, I think we're good. There's a link that
keep going.
someone has put in about some NRDC data. I think that's the only thing.
All right, let's move on. Two examples. We wanted to talk about health and jobs are the two that we're going to show you today. The health benefits are the result from reduction in pollutants. Specific health savings accrue from reductions in mortality, heart attacks, hospital admissions, emergency room visits, and work loss. What we did was we used the common COBRA modeling that is pretty common across the United States that actually calculates this on a dollar per capita basis. So we could actually calculate the value of the reduction in specific pollutants associated with the actions that get taken to get us to the accelerated goal. The next slide shows what those are. So SSG did their COBRA modeling so that it could estimate what those benefits are through 2050. The top line there is carried over from the previous financial metrics graphic. So the net benefit and cost after the energy savings, O&M, and capital costs was the 70 billion and 57 billion. When we add in the savings associated with the with health benefits, the 75 billion and 73 billion, we end up with a net benefit of 145 and 130 billion dollars through 2030 of doing these actions.
Through 2030? It's through 2050.
2050, okay, up here, 2050. I wish that was 2030. That would be pretty spectacular. For those of you that are graphically oriented, we have the same graphics, the cumulative net present value investment and returns of the cost. And the green bar, which we added in here, is the health benefits associated with it. And that extends the net implementation benefits or expands them. And again, this is the same graphic on the right, which is on an annual basis in nominal dollars for that year in billions of dollars. And at the bottom, we added in the value of the health benefits in the green section of this bar. So that actually increases the overall net. That's why we get an increase in overall net benefit associated with these actions, because of the reductions in health issues because of the reductions in criteria pollutants. And this is for the electrification scenario. Similar graph for the hybrid scenario. At the bottom, again, the green bar or the green section at the bottom is added in as health benefits. Because we're able to do this at a county level and aggregate them up, we were able to actually look at this on a county by county basis of what happens with regard to the health savings and where the health savings accrue spatially or geographically. And in this graphic, each county is represented here, and the amount of savings per capita, dollars per person, is on the scale, and you see the legend to the far left, the purple being less savings and the yellow being more savings. In this particular case, because of the density of Multnomah and Clackamas County around Portland, and you change a lot of the transportation emissions, you get a heck of a lot more benefits. So that's why they get more benefits associated, because the air shed gets cleaned up a lot quicker with the transportation electrification, but also just the density where most of those bad health effects occur, and less of them would occur there in the first place. So this is kind of a cool way to look at the way that the health benefits actually get distributed across the state. And
Alan, that's an annual benefit in
correct.
2050.
By 2050, this is what we see.
Yeah. Not cumulative.
Correct. shifting gears to jobs, the other co-benefit we wanted to look at, give you whetting your appetite for our next conversation, is the jobs and employment. SSG did a direct multiplier analysis, meaning what they did basically was they took how many millions of dollars are invested in these different sectors, and then using metrics that they have developed over time and used up-to-date information, they were able to estimate the person jobs per year created by how much investment there is, and that over on an annual basis. And we calculated that for each action and then aggregated them up. So in the peak year, by 2027, that's about 65,000 person job years created. If you want to look at it graphically, here's the electrification, the hybrid scenarios on how many jobs per person jobs per year. So, a person job per year isn't a permanent job forever and ever. It means that there's employment created for a year for one person doing this stuff. And it follows the investment. And you'll notice that the number of jobs or employment person years per year follow the investment curve that we saw before. So that's where you see the amount of jobs being created, in about, like I said, about 65,000 at the peak there in 2027. If we want to look at it spatially again by county, we can look at that and see that the where those jobs are being created. There it goes. And you see for the electrification and the hybrid scenario, that's the change in jobs through 2050. And it's interesting that there's higher employment or change in jobs relative to the population in a particular county in Eastern Oregon as opposed to Western Oregon. So the rural areas actually end up better off in terms of job creation than do the as a percentage basis than do the Western I-5 corridor counties. So those are two of several co-benefits that we're able to look at in this analysis. And next time we're going to come back with a more detailed analysis about which co-benefits, how do they get incorporated into the analysis, and some more metrics around this stuff. But we wanted to give you a sense of what this modeling was able to do and able to show, so that it'll give you the data that the commissioners will need to be able to incorporate them into the analysis. And if we don't have any more questions on that, I could turn it over to Chair McDonald. She can talk about where we're heading next, and then we can go to public comment.
And actually, I'm going to suggest that we take a break and then go to public comment, given that we're a little bit behind time.
Okay.
Looks like there's a question, Chair Donald.
Who's got a question?
I do.
Excellent.
So Alan, and maybe the consultant can answer this. You have this multiplier analysis for the jobs. Did they break that down to specifically what was the type of project that was undertaken, what industry it was in, and thus use a different multiplier for each of the industries? And one of the standards out there is something called IMPLAN. That can work down to the county level. So I was just interested to see how detailed was that sort of multiplier analysis for the job creations.
I'll let Chris answer that.
Tom, yeah. So for each action, a different job multiplier was applied to it. Mapped as best we could to the various multipliers that are out there. It's probably not a perfect one-to-one relationship, but if and kind of relative activity together with that. And then also some of them, so so as Alan said, those multipliers were applied to capital investment, but some actions they were also they weren't they were the capital investment wasn't used. Things like operation and maintenance differences were used to drive those. For example, in the EV adoption actions, we weren't using capital investment because obviously most of the vehicles aren't created in Oregon, so it didn't really make sense to say that that's driving jobs or the creation of jobs, but more of the reduction in maintenance costs or the maintenance visits because of due to the EVs would kind of change or decrease the job creation in some areas. So so it wasn't just straight across capital investment where it made sense. We would look at things like the operation and maintenance costs kind of as a driver for that as well.
And action by action as well. And what was the source of the multipliers, Chris?
The Economic Policy Institute was where we found a readily available public table.
And that was for 2021.
And I'm familiar with the in-plan that you mentioned there, but we don't have access to that one, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll go to the wrap up. Next slide. So we're at today learning about, we just learned about the scenarios, the financial metrics, and got a sneak preview of the co-benefits. We extended the comment period to August 23rd for the materials that we presented and discussed in the July 13th meeting. So if you missed that in the press release, you've got some more time to be providing comments to us. And frankly, you know, I'm sure we'll be accepting comments throughout the rest of our process. So, but if, you know, ideally we would kind of get most of the comments so that we can kind of start to incorporate those into our thinking. And then the materials that we presented today will be available, are available, and we'll be taking comments, like initial comments again on those by until September 10th. Then in the commission will be meeting to decide the treatment of co-benefits in September. We're assuming kind of mid to late September. The final report outline with recommendations will be available for the commission and public review in late September or early October. And we'll then hold a meeting in mid to late October, and if needed, mid-November to agree on what our recommendations should be. And then we'll go back and we'll do final modeling on the scenario that the commission is recommending, which, just to remember, it could be one of the two scenarios we have, or it could be taking some assumptions and actions from both scenarios and blending them together. And then hopefully we'll get the report all wrapped up by mid-December so that it is available in advance of the legislative session. So that's what we anticipate happening. This has been a big and complicated project, and so some of this may shift a little bit, but hopefully we'll be able to stay on track and get our report wrapped up so that we can submit it to the legislature in December. Any questions on process and next steps? Not seeing anything in the chat or hands raised. Great. Well, let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. Be back at 12:43. We're as close to that as we can get back, and then we'll go into public comment. Linda, if you could send me during the break how many people we have that are interested in doing public comments. And if you haven't signed up yet, please do that right away. and then we'll come back and have more discussion about where we are in the process and where we need to go, any preliminary reactions from commissioners about the choices that we have to make, and how we should be thinking about all of this. So I propose we go into a 10-minute break. Thank you.
Kathy, sorry about the technical difficulties at the beginning.
No worries.
Took a while for me to get used to the lag.
Yeah, it was definitely, I don't know whether we should try and always have somebody at Odo presenting. Assuming that they,
Yeah, that we could do that.
Everybody's-
It's just, yeah, we
Everybody's
could try
remote.
it. Yeah,
There's
but
nobody at Odo. Actually, the Odo system doesn't work as well as the home ones.
yeah, we could try and move through those, see if we could move through a little bit. I'm not sure if it has anything to do. I'll ask IT if it has anything to do with how many people go online too, because it seems to have gotten better as we had a little bit of a reduction in people turning off their visuals, like their video. So it kind of got a lot better when we did that. So we did have Nora Apner, and she said, hi, Linda, are we still doing public comment periods today? I'm just asking because members of the public are chiming in to her, asking if they can talk. So, okay, so we've had a couple. Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
You go ahead.
Yeah, and we had a couple of people raise their hand and then they put their hands down because they weren't getting called on. So we may want to say something to the effect that we save public comment and consider them their attendees. I should have said that was during the public comment period. So it's kind of my fault. I should have said for the public comment period in there. So
No, that's okay. And I think last time we did let some people make comments. So I think, and if we get through the commission discussion, we could certainly allow a little bit of public comment after that if we have time.
Okay.
Before we turn to the last. I'm having trouble finding the place to mute and unmute.
Mute and unmute. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's.
Not showing up on my screen.
Okay.
She said it was down at the bottom.
At the very bottom of your information, there should be a kind of a menu bar across the bottom.
Yeah, there isn't.
Okay.
Let's see.
Maybe
It doesn't say mute, start video, share.
There might be show meeting controls. Maybe that. Yeah, that did it.
Okay, there you go. Okay, because
thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay.
I'm gonna go on.
Go take a break. Let's see. We have two currently. We have Stephen. Just a moment. Sorry. Jake Stevens.
Okay.
And I will unmute him. There you go. Jake, you're unmuted.
Thank you, Jake. Welcome. If you could keep your comments to about 3 minutes. And maybe before we go to public comment for others, after the public comment period, we will have, the commission will have a discussion. If we still have time on the agenda and there are more questions that the public has that would like to ask questions, we're happy to try and accommodate that. But we'll have kind of the commission discussion first and then see if there's time. So with that, Jake, welcome, and love to hear your thoughts about our work.
Jake?
Thanks. Yeah, hi, my name is Jake Stevens. I'm the CEO of New Sun Energy, and we are an Oregon-based developer of renewable energy, primarily solar and battery storage. And so I'm a couple quick comments, just high level, as well as a couple specific ones on that great presentation. We are in the renewable energy space and incredibly active in a variety of venues throughout the state dealing with the decarbonization effort, particularly obviously on the electric power segment, and have been for about 7 years. So I was surprised to learn of the existence of this commission within the last week or so, which is both delightful as well as a little concerning that there's probably not some sort of connection or back and forth or mutual awareness. And I'm guessing that that's probably representative for a lot of the rest of the renewable energy development community. Obviously, a lot of the policies and efforts involved in decarbonization have a bit to do with renewable generation and its proliferation. So I'm simultaneously completely impressed with the type of analytics and the body of folks that is gathered here that we just saw and has been going on. And very impressed, as well as obviously, have to wonder about what might be falling in the cracks relative to the opportunities as relates to the renewable energy piece of things. So I figured that was worth at least flagging and bringing to folks' attention. And I'm happy to connect with people in the future and talk about how that stuff fits in. We have several thousand megawatts of generation under development in the state, and recently commissioned the first ever Bonneville directly connected solar projects in the Pacific Northwest. 4 projects built across Lake and Harney counties at 4 different locations. They're probably paying about $500,000 a year of property taxes across those 2 counties. At this point, we have maybe over a dozen permits in half a dozen counties across central and eastern Oregon, and thus pretty extensive experience dealing with a lot of the issues involved in legislation and as well as the agencies. I think at a high level, I think it's worth flagging what seems to be absent in our experience relative to state agencies is sort of proactive efforts to look at how agencies might actually facilitate the decarbonization efforts as relates supporting and facilitating renewable energy. And we've actually seen quite a bit of the opposite from agencies and sort of direct counterflow and using precious resources to sort of work against those efforts. And I probably should leave it there, but that's resulted in literally having to take issues to the Court of Appeals and so forth to help facilitate and avoid adverse policies that are being advocated by agencies, as well as dealing with on many of these things, which I think really beautifully have been put forward here in terms of like what are the benefits of the state of Oregon. HB 2021 has a policy statement that it is the state of Oregon's policy that to the maximum extent possible, all this new clean energy in HB 2021, i.e. 100% of the future for PacifiCorp and Portland General, result in direct benefits to communities in the state of Oregon in the form of labor income, creating and sustaining living meaningful wage jobs, and reducing burdens on environmental justice communities. We've had the Public Utility Commission explicitly state that they don't have to do anything related to that, to the point that we've had to now take them to court to get them to potentially give meaning to those words in their procurement policies as they oversee the procurements for the utilities. So I think there's a broad base of opportunities to help remove those obstacles in the state and potentially just also look at, what the agency should be doing to accomplish the major scale goals. How many thousands of acres do we want to have successfully permitted in these timelines to facilitate the decarbonization that I think all of this good work depends on in many cases. Wanted to flag one nexus, recognizing that most of what was just presented really wasn't about power generation, but I think New Sun is particularly expert in the transmission system in Bonneville in particular, and that's the fundamental fatal flaw in the decarbonization efforts. We're massively short, and there will be 10 and 15-year delays in the permitting process alone for the development and construction of transmission to solve those problems, for which billions of dollars in new facilities are required. And as I've been contemplating and diving deeper and deeper into that, you know, I keep coming back to realizing that the energy efficiency implementations that might occur in the Portland area potentially have pretty outsized impacts in reducing the actual new transmission builds required to succeed, because they effectively will take the edge off of the peak demands of the entire Portland area. When energy efficiency reduces the peak draw, that'll actually mitigate the peak transmission needs. And so there's some other pretty major co-benefits that, you know, may have decade-long benefits and billion-dollar sort of avoided costs associated with them that I think would be, you know, worth considering incorporation in some of this modeling work. So anyways, I'll pause there and happy to answer any questions or, you know, sync up with folks in the future. But I think there's some big pieces there that, again, just newly having become aware of this group, hopefully fit in somewhere in this process.
Yeah, thank you, Jake. Glad you found us. And we did have a focused conversation around transmission needs, storage needs associated with one of our recommendations in our 2020 report to the legislature, which was the 100% clean electric sector recommendations. So we did follow up with some deep dives. Certainly, I think would be beneficial to circle back to that as we start to look at how we implement these programs and understand a little more about what the utilities are proposing. So thank you. So Linda, I have lost my. Oh, there we go. Maybe I got it back. Okay, so next up is
Catherine Thompson.
Catherine Thompson, excellent. So we do have a few more people that have signed up. It looks like we have 5 or 6. So please keep your comments to 3 minutes or under.
Catherine, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
You're a little faint, but yes.
All right, I'll speak up. My name is Dr. Catherine Thomason. I'm speaking as the co-chair of the Multnomah County Democrats Climate Action Team. First, I want to thank you for your outstanding efforts to explain the modeling and some of the caveats listed at the introduction of this presentation segment. And thank you as well for moving this forward to guide the state. I'm hopeful it will be heeded. We are thrilled that you are shooting to model for improved targeting by 2030. Initial actions will tend to be the most impactful and cost-effective, so targeting achievement of those early on is very important, both to reduce the threat of climate change and to reduce the high costs of impacts from extreme weather and health. I would like to caution on 2 major issues. The first is not to rely as much in the programs elevated, especially for the accelerated 2030 goal, with emphasis on alternative liquid and gaseous fuels that have a wide variation in the literature in modeling their true greenhouse gas emissions. For example, we believe that corn ethanol is significantly worse than gasoline in greenhouse gas emissions, along with other non-quantified societal problems of nitrogen pollution and food availability. In the case of RNG, the true evaluation of methane leaks, which occur whether the gas is bio or fossil, is not adequately included in many analyses. I'd urge you in these cases to ramp up as quickly as possible the electrification of transportation and buildings, and to advocate for legislative actions that would achieve these rather than agency-only tools. I think that's very, very important because of the pushback that we're seeing from major industry and the fuels industries as well. Lastly, bringing forth a concept that methane gas heat pumps are not readily available, whereas electric heat pumps are, and they're well studied, especially assuming your high market penetration by 2030. It may also be useful to bring forth new frameworks for fossil fuel industries, such as the encouraging methane gas industry to become a thermal industry that's being piloted in Massachusetts, where they are building neighborhood ground sourced heat pumps owned and run by the thermal industry with connections to each home. This type of thinking is important for industry success and jobs creation, instead of advocating for hybrid sources, which, as you've shown, have lower net cost benefits. Thank you so much for allowing public comment.
Thank you, Catherine. Really appreciate your ongoing interest in our work and comments. And
Next.
who is next?
Karen Harrington. Just
Excellent.
a moment.
Welcome, Karen. Karen?
Can you hear me?
We can. Welcome.
Okay, I actually didn't raise my hand, but since you called on me, I am a member of Climate Reality Portland and co-chair of the legislative committee. And so our focus is on Oregon legislation that will really ramp up the speed and scale of Oregon going all electric, because that's how we feel like we're going to make our goals. We're particularly interested at the moment on the Infrastructure Reduction Act, and really encouraged by that act, and that will get our nation to 40% reduction in emissions by 2030. Which I'm thrilled to see that this commission is also looking at 2030 and that you will match up with that group. But I think to get us there, we have to look at all electric, and that the hybrid system isn't going to get us there. And that's how we are looking at it, and we hope you'll give that consideration. And thanks for all of the work that you're doing. And I think you're going to really help us get to that last 10%. I think Oregon will be a key player there.
Excellent. Thank you, Karen.
Okay. Tim Miller.
Welcome, Tim.
Hear me?
Tim?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Very good. Thank you, Chair McDonald and members of the commission. And big thanks to Alan and Odo and the analyst team for this really great information. Super helpful to be able to understand these investments and their yield and looking at those curves over time. I want to just applaud what Alan covered about really digging into the valuation of the co-benefits. I thought there was a strong list there of some of the economic considerations around co-benefits. And I'm speaking, sorry, I should have introduced myself. I'm the executive director of PECI, and we're a funder of climate policy work. But I'm speaking also with the experience of having run Enhabit, which was an organization that helped some 5,000 Oregon families do deep energy retrofits on their homes. And so I just want to double down on the comments about the importance of valuing health risks and those kinds of considerations. Burning gas in a house, the dramatically increased risk of kids getting asthma. In addition to missing school days and parents missing work days and all the other cascading effects of the health impacts. And I know it's going to be hard to value those, but I really encourage attaching some pretty strong dollar figures to those effects. And then there are also things like air sealing and other measures that would go along with doing these residential retrofits that have their own indoor air quality benefits and other benefits. And as Angus mentioned, the value of air conditioning, let's figure out how to value that when at least if you're adding a heat pump to a house. So I would go as far to say, quantifying these various benefits and reorganizing then the MAC curve that Alan was instructing us on is, to me, super important. Even so much as to say, I don't think it's fair to call the straight up sort of myopic, how much dollars do I put into this system and how many dollars do I save in my utility bills? I don't think it's fair to call that an economic analysis. I think we should change and we have obviously in this state a history of, I'd say, misusing the term cost effective. We should call it narrow cost effectiveness or narrow economic analysis or a narrow financial analysis, because it's not a full analysis if you're just looking at those things. And I can say that of the 5,000 families that upgraded their homes years ago under the program I mentioned, I think very few of them made those decisions based on just dollars and cents. They make decisions on a whole lot of other factors. And let's try to get all those economic considerations in there and then recognize that there are non-economic co-benefits, like it's really hard to measure the value of a kid missing a school day or getting asthma or whatever those things. Those should be the icing on top, but let's put dollars behind all those other trade-offs. Thanks.
Thank you. Really appreciate your comments, Tim. Karen, it looks like Nick is next. Nick Keenan.
Nick, did you want to say anything more? It looks like we got your question answered. So I went ahead and unmuted you if you want to, if you had any other.
Thanks so much for the data.
Okay. I think that's it then, Catherine.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. With that, we can move on to our the kind of additional discussion that we had, and it might make sense for someone to pull up the slide deck, maybe Alan, and then we can refer to that as we need to. But just interested in reactions to what you all heard today, comments on any of the comments that we heard from the public, suggestions about how we move forward. Any of that would be very welcome.
This is Tom. I just had a quick comment on some of the public comments, especially the one that two people, I believe, said, we should not look at hybrid type models, really concentrate just on electrification. And I'd like to just, in a sense, respond to that a little bit in that, looking at the hybrid alternative fuel sources, I don't think that slows anything down or changes the picture, but I think it's more robust that we look at these things. As time goes on, technology is going to change too. And so I just think keeping those other options available to us doesn't necessarily mean we will miss the 2030 possible target, but it allows us to have that richness. And then as we go down the road, these things may become more viable, more economically viable alternatives for us to use to reduce emissions. So I think I think it's good we have a hybrid look, and I think we shouldn't lose sight of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Potowski. Other comments?
This is Tom Reitman, and I had
Excellent.
a comment or
Thank you, Tom. Go ahead.
Yeah, based on like what Tim Miller was saying, maybe we need to move retrofitting up. I mean, I guess I need some clarification. I mean, I assume we're not going to put a heat pump in a home that doesn't have insulation, because all we'll do is raise the utility cost, which would be an equity issue. It would affect low-income people to a higher degree. So I guess, yeah, just some clarification on where we are on that.
Yeah, Alan or Chris, do you want to? Oh, you've gone on mute. Somehow you put yourself on mute.
Commissioner Reitman, there's a question: would we put a heat pump in a house that wasn't uninsulated?
I think that he's hoping to understand how we're thinking about retrofitting. I think it's based on the discussion that we had around the cost curve.
Right. So as we move into the next two phases, the next phase of what we're going to be working on is the co-benefits and looking at those. That'll shed some light on that. But also, when we come to the recommendations part of the work that the commission's going to do, I think having a recommendation along the lines of what you're talking about is energy efficiency first. We want to make sure everybody as efficient as possible before we start putting in solar panels and retrofitting their heating and cooling equipment. And that might be an appropriate place for that. As far as the MAC curve, I don't think it really takes that into consideration. It's purely looking at the what and how, and not so much on how we do it. So the how part comes later. Hope that was responsive.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind me jumping in, Alan. So the way we did order the actions is we did do the energy reduction in the, or I guess the heat load reduction or the retrofit, building retrofits first in the order of actions in the modeling, and then we applied heat pumps to that heat load. So we did account for that reduction going forward. So the MAC kind of bar that you saw there does take that into account.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Chris. That just as an FYI, the order in which you put things into the model matters. So if you put in the efficiency stuff or the envelope first, then what you have to apply to through the heat pump is less expensive, but that creates lower greenhouse gas emission reductions. Same with, for instance, on the transportation sector, if you implement the clean fuels program, which reduces the carbon intensity of the fuels, then you put in EVs. Actually, over time, that EV starts creating less and less greenhouse gas emission reductions because of the carbon intensity improvements to the fuel. So how you do that, and that's part matters in the model. So that's we're very cognizant of that, and SSG has that pretty much down in order to figure that out. That's kind of the art of modeling as opposed to the science of it.
Thank you.
Excellent. Commissioner Ford?
Yeah, thank you. Two comments. One, a really good presentation. Lots of depth there that needs needs more time to I guess get our heads around. But I would agree with the other commissioner's comment about it's too early in the process to be excluding options. We need to fully look at both options in my viewpoint, and to be more fully informed to see what the options really look like. And so I'm not in favor of just moving to an electric only assessment, but I think we need to keep our options open and evaluate those trade-offs, because I think that's a very informative thing to do, is to evaluate trade-offs. And I guess the only other question I have for the team there is maybe I missed this, but to understand the cost savings in energy, which is the big bars that are on the cost savings. What's the basis of the cost savings bars? Is that based on projected energy cost, or is it a flat cost that's just used to based on inflation values, or how are you coming up with those cost savings? Because I think that's a critical component here of this discussion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a big part of things.
Chris, do you want to
tackle?
jump in? Sorry.
Yep. So the energy, all of the actions that we're modeling are going to impact the amount of energy that's being used in one way or another. It might go up, might go down, depending on what we do. And so the various actions will have various fuels associated with it as well. So I guess, being a more specific example, if you're switching from an internal combustion engine to an electric vehicle, we're comparing the costs of the internal combustion engine scenario, or the kind of the I want to say business plan, but I can never remember the new acronym, the PROUD scenario.
Programs and regulations.
Yes, programs and regulations under development. So they would have a number of internal combustion engines still left in that scenario. And so they would have a price of gasoline associated with it, and the projections, for example, gasoline and all the fuels come from EIA. So, and as I mentioned earlier, obviously some of the prices are more volatile than others, and we're not going to catch all the blips and downturns along the way. So, the probably average out over time. But so whatever projections or increases they see is what we're using or capturing in the model. And so we would show, a gasoline cost, then we would show an electricity cost between those two scenarios, and we would take the difference, and that would be kind of either your energy costs or your energy savings, depending on the different actions. So some it would go up and some might go down. For example, a heat pump action would show your energy costs going up, mainly because electricity is much more expensive than natural gas, even though you're using less electricity, kind of overall. So it depends on there's lots of dynamics at play there.
I would also add that the forecasts that we're using, Commissioner Ford, are from the Federal Energy Information Agency. So the EIA forecast for prices of all the fuels is what we're using. Most of the local forecasts are very, very short term, and we don't get very many long-term forecasts. So EIA is one of the better, not the only appropriate kind of forecast for prices that we used in this model. And it's pretty commonly used as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. But I mean, I'm just looking to see what those prices were. 2 years ago, gasoline was at $2.70, $2.80 a gallon. Here now it's for about $2 more. So that would have a significant impact in this analysis, I would assume. So I don't know if you're capturing that or not, or whether those those federal models are capturing these price changes that are occurring.
We didn't incorporate the price excursions that we're currently seeing into the model over the long term. We assumed that they were going to go up and come back down once the war and the pandemic were over. And so overall, that would come out in the wash, whether or not the excursion happened. So most of that happened after we started the modeling anyway. And it was difficult for us to then put this price bump in there and then figure out what is it going to go back down to, and then figure out how it's going to escalate after that. Prices over my career have never followed a static straight line up and to the right. They always go up and down, and so when you do modeling, we end up kind of peanut buttering that and having it be that artificial, but probably over the long term accurate escalation of prices.
Yeah, I mean, I get that if we're looking out to 2050, my concern is the modeling that goes to 2030, right? So these short-term price increases or decreases will have a significant impact on the outputs of the model.
Yeah, and it actually what it does is it makes the benefits go higher. So it doesn't change the overall trajectory of the gist of the analysis takeaways. It makes everything look a little bit better. If gas prices go up, we get more value out of it. Natural gas prices or gasoline.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got all my questions answered. Thank you.
Great. Any other thoughts that commissioners would like to share?
Yeah, just one more thought on that, if I might, Chair McDonald. So by not incorporating that, we're being conservative. If we were to incorporate that stuff, and it would bump up the benefits beyond what we were showing. So we took the more conservative route and projected out the long-term escalation of prices for all the fuels.
Excellent, thank you. Any other commissioners' thoughts about our work so far or going forward? We had offered at our last meeting, we offered to do a webinar deep dive for folks that might want to dig into the specifics and ask questions of our modelers. So we haven't set a date for that yet, but we can, I don't know whether it makes sense for us to do that now or, or after we talk about the co-benefits, but we might want to do one sooner, but we'll confer in the team and then send out a press release letting people know that we're going to be doing that, and happy to have the public engaged as well as to go ahead and kind of do that kind of a deep dive. So we have a couple of one comment in the from Tim Miller. If you want to go ahead and jump in with your question. Linda, can you unmute him?
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to add to Alan's point about fossil fuel costs and the long-term projection and the notion that they will come back down. I would hope that the analysis, you mentioned you're being conservative by hoping they'll come back down and thereby, you know, giving fossil fuel its best chance. But I would suggest that even the variability itself needs to be a cost. So would you, you know, rather pay $3 one year, $5 the next year, and then $3 the year following, or pay some higher number for a more predictable price like we get with electricity, especially electricity from renewables? So hopefully that's in the analysis. I don't know, but variability is a cost.
We had a conversation about that earlier this week in our weekly meeting to talk about this modeling work, about the importance of certainty.
Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. Pat Delaquil, you want to make your comment?
Pat, you've been unmuted. Pat, let's see. Okay, we'll try it.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry, I muted myself accidentally. I want to emphasize Tim's comment. I think the variability is a very important factor. It is a very distinct factor between fossil fuels and renewable fuels. And therefore, it really needs to be a factor that's added into this analysis. It's not going to go away. It's going to continue to be there. And these slowly inclining cost projections are fiction, as we all know. I mean, they're something that modelers always have to deal with. As a modeler myself, I understand this completely. I think also, as a general comment, the fact that we continue to be conservative in our analyses is really not doing ourselves any favors. We continue to underestimate both the impacts of climate change as well as the benefits of transitioning sooner rather than later. And we really need to, while I understand the intent to try to keep options open and not foreclose anything, but the economics and all of the modeling work, not just this modeling, but so many other modeling analyses continue to show us that the least cost approach for our decarbonization is to focus on electrification of buildings and transportation. And we need to keep that in mind as we put together our near-term roadmap. How we get there and how we get there sooner rather than later will really depend on what those final policies are to help us get there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Apter?
Thank you. I'll keep it quick. I just wanted to echo and appreciate the comments that we just heard from Tim and Pat, and note that, you know, it has become more common practice for Oregon state agencies to incorporate into their fiscal impact statements an acknowledgement that, you know, as the state is moving away from fossil gas and diesel and traditional fossil fuels, that the impacts from oil price shocks become more muted and benefit consumers and the state. And I think a recent example is the Clean Fuels Program fiscal impact statement. I think there are plenty of others. And as Pat was saying, you know, many beyond the state of Oregon as well, underscoring this. So just want to appreciate that it would be beneficial to, as much as we can, incorporate how transitioning to electricity will mean less volatility and therefore protect consumers and our economy from price swings that we know will continue to be part of the future. So just appreciate those comments. Thanks.
Yeah, good point. And Angus, you have a long comment, which I will let you unmute you to allow you to make.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Kathy. I just sent a note in there saying that's my comment. I don't need to elaborate on it in oral testimony. So thanks anyway.
Okay, we'll capture all the comments as a part of our record of the meeting. So
Yep. Thank you.
Other thoughts from commissioners? Or commissioner representatives? Okay. Hearing none.
Sorry.
Yeah, there's one comment.
That's it. From Oriana.
David, did you want to make a comment?
No, but we have another commissioner that does.
Excellent, Commissioner Oriana. Or it's like
Thank you so much, Chair McDonald and Commissioner Ford for the assist there. I did want to make one kind of general comment on the co-benefits piece that I feel like after some reflection may be missing, which is the issue of displacement and how these different policies impact renters versus owners. I think when we kind of smooth between those two potential groups, we lose some of the cost and impact at the individual level, and also the viability of some of these solutions. Putting a heat pump in every home is only possible if there are some policies that support the costs for landlords and help to ensure that folks don't get displaced with rents going up as a result. So they need to be a significant enough incentive to ensure that that cost does not have to be passed on. So I think I just want to name that if it's possible to add to the co-benefits, a look at displacement risks associated with different policies or mitigation efforts. I know that's a little bit more in the weedsy than kind of some of these higher level ideas. I do think that's an important consideration because when we don't make policies that take renters into account, the consequences can be quite significant for many communities, especially lower income communities.
Absolutely. And I think if whether or not we can kind of build it into the co-benefits analysis, I think making sure when we talk about the actions and describe them, we're flagging those kinds of issues that should be thought about as decision makers are thinking about how to develop programs and make investments. So I'm glad you raised that point. Anyone else wants to comment? Commissioner Potowski.
Yes, just a quick comment. I was wondering whether I should even say this, but you know, with all the different demand that is coming on, that is in somewhat non-traditional demand for electricity, you may actually see electricity prices becoming more volatile. And depending on the transmission that's available, the infrastructure and the demand is higher than the infrastructure catching up. If we look what happened in Texas with the prices going through the roof. So just be aware that conditions can change and the sort of less volatile electricity prices can change as the economic environment changes.
Thank you, Commissioner. I wanted to recognize for the record that Commissioner Robertson is also with us. He's, I think, with us remotely, so he may be just on by phone. So I don't know, Linda, if you were successful in helping him unmute his line or not, but just wanted to acknowledge that and let him make a comment if he wishes.
Whoever's on the phone at 503-497, and I'm sorry, I can't see the last 4 digits. You are unmuted. If this is Dave Robertson, please comment.
It's not Dave Robertson.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Well,
whoever's on the phone.
Just want to note it. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Is Dave Robertson on? I've unmuted 503-621. I don't know the last 4. Is this Dave Robertson? I've unmuted. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well,
sorry. That's the only way I can tell. I apologize.
No worries. Well, he's joining us from remotely, so it makes it a little more challenging. And he may have had to drop off. So, but we'll note for the record that he was on during the majority of the call. Okay. One last silence to see if any other comments. People want to make any other comments.
I do not see any additional information in the chat.
Oh, great. Excellent. Well, with that, we can go to our final agenda item. And I need to share my screen. So I think you have to give me the power to do that. Is that right, Linda? You're on mute, Linda, so.
Yeah, I'm taking it. I'm taking it to you. Just a moment.
Okay, thank you.
Good luck with all that, Kathy.
We are almost exactly on time, so.
Okay, just a moment.
Do I have control?
No, not yet. It's
okay.
being difficult. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
It's the first
No,
time
that's okay.
Kathy's been out of control.
Well, on our last agenda item, we wanted to give you an update on our natural and working lands proposal project that we discussed at our July 13th meeting, and give an opportunity to update folks on the folks that applied, or at least the number of applications and the distribution of applications that we received for people to be on the Natural and Working Lands Advisory Committee, as well as some updates on where things sit with the Institute for Natural Resources and the work that they've started doing on our behalf. So when I do have, oh good, I'm now the presenter. So I will share my screen. See. Oop. Oh, I see. That's just doing that. There we go. Okay, our Natural and Working Lands project update. As you will recall, we discussed this at our last meeting, and in that conversation, we let you know that the Institute for Natural Resources had applied for and secured funding on behalf of the Commission from the U.S. Climate Alliance and the Natural Resource Conservation Service to be able to fund some of the work that we had identified to do during the short session. Not all of the work that we had identified, but some important elements of that work. And so the Institute is has the funding in hand from the U.S. Climate Alliance, and we're down to final signatures with NRCS. And they have kind of 6 things that they are going to help us do, including facilitating meetings of a natural working lands advisory committee. And we are underway on that work. I will, both Lisa Gaines, who's the head of INR, and Lisa Debreuker, who has been contracted to facilitate the Natural and Working Lands Advisory Committee, are with us today, and I'll give them a few minutes to introduce themselves at the end. But wanted to just kind of give you an overview of the folks that have applied, and a little bit of a reminder on some of the criteria and process. So in terms of the criteria for selecting folks to be on the advisory committee, we wanted to make sure we had broad representation, both geographically, by sector or types of folks that are engaged in natural and working lands management, and then by area of expertise, the types of natural and working lands expertise that we will want to have as we develop out the products that and get input on the products that the Institute for Natural Resources is developing for us. In addition, we identified wanting to select people who had a good knowledge of state and federal natural and working lands programs. We wanted to make sure that the applicants or committee members have a good understanding of their sector's interests and needs. And we wanted to have people that have a demonstrated track record of working collaboratively across interests. And so we put together a application form and posted that. And on, I believe, July 19th, we received all of the applicants by August 5th, the deadline. And then we've done a little bit of an analysis on those that applied. I'll run through that relative to the criteria. So you can see here the people that identified knowledge of one or more of these land types. So we asked folks to identify one or more of the land types that they were familiar with, and have a pretty good cross-section across the land types, with the most limited being urban lands. And then we asked kind of area of interest or expertise that people would be bringing. And again, we asked people to identify, all that applied. And you'll see a couple of places where we had pretty low response, youth concerns and tribal government. We also had, and we've just done a preliminary analysis, but we also had a few other areas that, while people expressed expertise in it, it was not clear we couldn't clearly see the expertise in the materials that they provided. So there may be a few other areas where we've got gaps as we look more closely at the people that have applied, but a pretty good distribution across the areas of expertise. And then the third representation that we were interested in was that geographic representation, and the darker green are the places where applicants identified their county of residence. And the lighter green are counties that we didn't get any applicants from. And so there is a pretty low number, especially in Southeast Oregon. I think there are a total of 20 counties that we got applicants from, and we got a total of 36 applicants in that process. Good cross section of folks that that we're going to be taking a closer look at. Oops. And then finally, in terms of kind of process, I mentioned that we posted the application form and did a press release on the 19th. We have assembled an approach to kind of categorizing the folks and hopefully helping us kind of select a good complement of people. As I mentioned, there may be some areas that we end up determining we are a little unrepresented in, either geographically in the sectors or by expertise. And one of the things I wanted to get a little feedback from the commissioners is I think it might be most effective for the commissioners that will be reviewing the applications and perhaps working with some of the state agencies might help us fill some gaps and perhaps others, and that we might want to curate that rather than going out and opening up another opportunity for applications, because I think it might be difficult to kind of explain the unicorns we're looking for to add to the commission. But I wanted to raise that with commissioners just to make sure that you are all were comfortable with that. And then I'm hoping we'll be able to schedule our first meeting in September, a little bit later than we had hoped, but I think given that we're still getting under contract, or INR is still getting under contract, I think we're making pretty good progress. If you missed the last meeting, we did post the work plan, and well, we posted kind of the timeline that we have been anticipating. And so that's in that memo that we provided on the natural and working lands effort. So with that, I can stop sharing my screen. If I can remember how to do that. Nope. There we go. And I would love to get reaction from commissioners on that approach. Commissioner Ford, I saw that you had a thumbs up, so appreciate that. Commissioner Bagnara, any comment?
Yeah, I'd love to see that map again, but I have some pretty significant concerns with proceeding without representation from Southeast Oregon or without representation from tribal governments. And I'll put a little asterisk on that in terms of sometimes these spaces are not conducive for certain communities to engage, in particular if they're not resourced. And I want to just acknowledge that there may be other ways to bring in that perspective, but that I don't think it's a good result if we don't have Southeastern Oregon perspectives represented in part of the conversation, or we don't have tribal governments represented. And I'd love to know if there's like an engagement that ODO will be doing. I know there was in the original Natural and Working Lands report with tribal governments, but that government to government relationship may be where that lives. But I think if there's proactive outreach that can be done to bring folks from Southeast Oregon, that would be really valuable to the conversation. Just thinking about where a lot of our natural and working lands are in the state, it feels concerning to have that piece underrepresented and have an overrepresentation from Western Oregon.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And that's why I thought if we could do that proactive outreach and really kind of think about how do we fit some people in, that could make sure we have good representation. So completely agree. Commissioner Reitman?
Well, I just feel like we need to recruit. I mean, how does the commission feel about it if we, for example, if we went to the tribes and asked them to give us names of people that didn't apply, are we going to require that they go through the application process? Or can we just go ahead and recruit those people?
I think that's a good question. I might defer that to our facilitator and the Institute for Natural Resources based on best practices. I think it would be helpful for us to, even if we did a short interview with folks so that we could kind of capture their background and expertise so that we have that to share with other advisory committee members. I think it probably would be important to do something, but it could potentially be a somewhat shorter process, a shorter application. I don't know, any thoughts on that? Yeah, my intent, and your comment came on and off very quickly, but I think I caught it. I agree we should do our very best to make sure we fill gaps before we start the committee. And so my hope is that we will be able to get together and go through all the applications and figure out, which ones we think make sense and where some of the gaps are, and then kind of go immediately to trying to recruit folks to fill some of those gaps. So that would be my ideal approach.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree as well. I do think it's important that, as Commissioner McNamara indicated, we have to really do our job to ensure that we have the breadth of participation that we really need. And so I'd say that's more important than the first meeting date. So, so let's try to get that done. Are there funds available in any of the grants that we received from the U.S. Climate Alliance to help us support folks that might not otherwise be able to participate? But I'm assuming some of this will be done video conference wise, which will be helpful, but just a quick question there.
Yeah, again, I will defer to the Institute for Natural Resources, but potentially there could be a little bit of budget to help cover that. And I'm going to let the two Lisas introduce themselves after we have a little more conversation. Speak to some of these questions.
Good morning. My name is Lisa Gaines. I direct the Institute for Natural Resources. It's delightful to be here with you all and to work with you over the course of the next 14 months with this particular project. To answer your question about funding, we did not directly put in funding for individuals to travel to a single location to be able to participate in these meetings. We were assuming that we would have a larger and wider geographic diversity of folks and that we would conduct the meetings online. We did have a conversation whether or not we would try to get at least one meeting in person, and whether or not that is an early meeting or a later meeting, we have not decided. And then to the second point, what I wanted to mention is I will pass it on to Lisa DeBrucare. So our role was the commission had put out the solicitations for applications, put together the criteria, and we helped to just sort of compile that information and put it in a form that was just more generalizable and readable. And in Lisa DeBrucare taking the lead on that, we did make some discoveries as to who was or who was not represented in the list of applications. And we discussed actually about 2 days ago, a couple of solutions that Lisa had brought to us. So I will pass it on to her. Thank you for giving me time to speak.
Thanks, Lisa, and thanks everybody for welcoming us today. We're pretty excited about this project. We did do an analysis of the applications as they came in, just to kind of get an overview of what was coming in. And there are some solutions. There is a Pacific Northwest Tribal Climate Change Network out of the University of Oregon. They deal with all of the tribes in the state of Oregon, and they deal with climate change issues. That would be a great initial place for us to go to see if there are either interested individuals or if that consortium, that network as a whole, would like to be a part of this process. And I think we can make it work either way. There's lots of other options that we talk with Kathy about in terms of identifying that 5 to 6 individuals where there might be gaps, whether it be geographic representation, or expertise, and literally go after those folks, attempt to recruit them, see what their interest is. We believe as well that this group needs to be broadly represented, very diverse, representative of all areas of Oregon and of all of those habitat types that are described in our scope of work. So Kathy, I hope that helps.
And do you want to just introduce your background and role? I think I touched on it briefly, but this might be nice.
Yeah, so I've been hired as a facilitator for the project. I spent 21 years in state government in Oregon and Missouri, of which 11 of those years were at the executive level, all in natural resource agencies. I've been responsible for land management as well as outreach and education programs for state resource agencies. And about 20 years ago, I started my own consulting business. And since that time, I've been working with natural resource organizations throughout the West and in Canada on a variety of issues, from landscape scale planning to regional strategic objectives, etc. This is a fascinating project, and Lisa and I are very excited to be a part of it.
Thank you, Lisa. Senator Finley.
Thank you, Catherine. I just have a couple of questions. I agree with Oriana in her conversation of there are vast quantities of this state. My district is included in that at 43% of the landmass. It's not represented in that in your map. I find that very troubling. But a question I have is, the state of Oregon has an agreement, and we've signed years ago on with the 9 federally recognized Indian tribes, that we have consultation with them, government to government consultation. Has this occurred on this effort and they chose not to participate, or have we not done that and lived up to our agreement? Thank you.
Yeah, a great question. We did attend 2 meetings during the development of the Natural and Working Lands proposal with the natural resource managers. There's a group of state and tribal natural resource managers that meet on a regular basis. And that was the recommendation to us about how to best engage the tribes. We also sent letters out to all the tribal chairs, inviting them to come speak to the commission and to participate in a focus group. And so that's what we had done then. I do feel remiss in that I didn't repeat those 2 things in terms of sending the press release out to those 2 groups. So I do feel like in kind of the push of all things roadmap and this natural and working lands, I do feel like I could have done a better job of outreach. So I think it's important to do that now, and I think we should be trying to pursue those multiple options that that Lisa suggested, as well as the tribal chairs and natural and working lands resource managers.
Thank you.
And Senator, you are going to be on my list too to help fill the void in Southeast Oregon. So I thought you could help think through some of the folks.
Yeah, I absolutely will do what I can. I mean, I think it's a terribly large void that we need to fill.
Absolutely. And we'll say, we didn't talk about it today, but we do have, we are building out technical expert ad hoc kind of committees to help with some of the technical pieces that and deliverables. And we do have a specific rangelands group that is being headed by one of Lisa's staff, who has worked on has provided technical support to the Sage Grouse Partnership that's been ongoing for a long time now, over 5 years now. And so luckily she is very well plugged into the work that is going on in rangelands in southeastern Oregon, both because of that, and the Institute also works with the BLM to do all of the AIM sampling. And I can't remember what AIM stands for, but it's all the rangeland sampling in Southeast Oregon. So we've got some good technical folks that will help us, but I also think we need, folks that are land managers from that part of the state. I think it's going to be, or, engaged in land management, natural and working lands management in one form or fashion from that part of the state.
If I may interrupt, currently what some of the technical leads, the woman that Kathy is speaking about is named Megan Kreutzberg. And right now, the teams are there just contacting people to see what experts and expertise there is out there. And we're compiling a list of individuals of who can be contacted as we work through this over the next 14 months. That list is not complete. It will hopefully be a little bit more comprehensive, but we're in the very beginning stages of reaching out. And if any of you have individuals that you think we should reach out to, please do let us know either through Kathy or directly to me, and I'm happy to provide my email address.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Then in terms of next steps, the subcommittee of the commission that volunteered to go through the applications, hopefully we'll be able to schedule time this next week to go through those together to identify where we have gaps, but also kind of the group of people that we think might be a good group from the applications that we do have. Because we'll need that to kind of think about what the gaps are. And then we will go about recruiting to fill those gaps and continue to lay the foundation for this work. Lisa Debercare is almost done with a website that we'll use, a standalone website that we'll use to keep all of the information on this effort posted. There'll be a link back to the Natural and Working Lands page on the Oregon Global Warming Commission, so there's good visibility there as well. And so those are all next steps associated with this work. On the roadmap work, we have public comments due on the 23rd on the materials from July, and public comments due on September 8th from the materials that we discussed today. We'll discuss within the technical team working on the roadmap the best timing for a deeper opportunity for a deeper dive webinar on the assumptions that are going into the model. So we'll make sure to do that. We're hoping to get the outline and recommendations out in later in September or early October to be able to inform a late October meeting to help us start to shape the recommendations. We anticipate that we'll probably need another meeting in November, because this is important work and there may be some issues that are easy to agree on and other issues that we might need to have a little more discussion before we make decisions, and then try and wrap the project up by sometime in December. So those are all kind of next steps that are in front of us. Do want to encourage the public to provide comments to us on your sense of the natural and working lands and the roadmap work that we'll be doing. And there'll be opportunities at all of these meetings to provide public comment in addition to written comments in advance. So if there aren't any other comments, I think we can adjourn the meeting, but I'll.
Commission Magnera has her hand up.
Oh, great. Thank you. I can't see everybody, so thank you for helping with that.
Yeah,
Commissioner
sorry, I'll make
Magnera?
this very brief. I just had a thought, which is that the timing of this work group coming together may not be conducive for many natural resources providers, just thinking about harvest and some of the things that happen in the fall. So might just flag that you might have a better opportunity recruiting folks if there's some consideration for kind of what the scheduling may look like or what the ask may be like at a time when many folks are going to be very busy with harvest.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The part of the timing was with the hopes that we would be able to get at least a couple of the early products, which are focused on developing a scope of work for a jobs and training analysis and a scope of work for the inventory improvements that we want to see so that they could be considered in the long session next winter. So that's what's kind of pushing us along. I think that it should be a good discussion point for us in the subgroup that reviews these. We did get a pretty good response from folks in the agricultural space. Who might be those that would be, may have the most on their plates at this time of year, but we'll definitely consider that and follow up as appropriate. Okay. Any other comments? Okay. With that, I will adjourn the August 18th meeting of the Oregon Global Warming Commission. I want to thank everyone for the great comments and discussion that we had, and look forward to next steps on both of these important projects. Thank you.
Catherine, you have a Teams invite that came over probably to you. You want to go over
Okay.
and switch to that? And I think Alan and the other individuals that are over there, I'll be there as soon as possible. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. I'll be there. This one's in here. Oh, God. They're in the box.